Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If you're just tuning in, well, we're pretty much at the end of the month, and it's been a pretty awesome month where we've been really focused on biodiversity as well as endangered species. So we've been talking to scientists and explorers from all over the world who have dedicated their life to protecting our planet's species as well as the habitats that they do need to survive. So as I mentioned, we're at the end of the month. Our final event this month is a virtual field trip out to Oklahoma. So we are hanging out at the Sutton Avian Research Center, and we're going to learn a little bit about how they're trying to save one of the most endangered bird species in North America, the Masked Bobwhite Quail. So we're really excited to be joined by Sarah Harden today. Sarah, it looks like a beautiful day in Oklahoma.
It's gorgeous today, which is funny because the last 10 days have been straight rain. So I'm really thankful the weather is good for today. And the birds are loving it too. You will be able to hear them. I'll turn you guys around here. You'll be able to hear them when we go in this building. So this is the facility where we keep, we have about 200 masked bobwhite quail. These quail are native to southern Arizona, and they got wiped out in the 1970s because the place that they live, the area that they live, got wiped out by a cattle trail. So the cattle destroyed their environment and they weren't able to fight back. So we got a 5-year grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to breed them and help bring them back. So this is what the males look like. That's why we call them the masked bobwhite, because they've got those black feathers. They look like they have masks on. So go in here. So we have to keep it very, very clean. We don't want any sort of bacteria or diseases getting in the building that the outside birds could possibly transmit. And at each door, there's an exit down there, and then at each door, there's a bath that we have to clean the bottom. So our shoes on. It's breeding season, so we don't trap in any diseases from the outside. Female doors go into this room. And we separate them during the winter when it's not breeding season because there are no eggs. So we try to keep them separated because they are pretty aggressive. So we want to keep them separated when we don't have to have them all together. Now, so the males are over here. You can see we've got a lot of shiny things, some fun boxes, little teepees made out of sticks. We're just trying to keep them entertained because with birds in captivity, they tend to pick on each other, and we don't want that. And they love bright colors and shiny things, so we try to keep a lot of stuff to do in here. And if you guys, here, I'll hold it still. You guys can see those are all the males. So we are in breeding season. Breeding season just started. So these are our leftover males that we didn't have enough room for. We don't have enough breeding pens. So these guys are our backups in case something happens to the males we are using. And this side is all of our females. There's not nearly as many females. We have about 200 birds, but about 120 are males and 80 are females. But the girls I've noticed are much more scared about me. They like to stay as far away as possible. So they try to keep cover, and we've got a lot of things to do in their pen as well, so they're not picking on each other. Oh, did I lose you?
Okay. Yeah, you still hear me okay, Sarah? We lost you for a second.
Yes, I can see and hear you guys. Is everyone back?
Okay. So that's what happens sometimes. We had a really good test call, but it seems like The signal's a little uncooperative this time, but hopefully things will clear up as we get going.
Okay, so I'll try and stay closer to the router. So now I'm going to show you guys the breeding pen. So I'm just going down that hallway. So we have 37 breeding pens, and I'm about to show you 12 of them. So here is an example of a breeding pen. So we've got a male and a female. Of course, they have food and water in there, and then we give them little boxes and fun little gems and balls to play with. And quail love cover. So you can see there's a lot of places to hide in there. They're, of course, still pretty scared of us. I hope they realize that we will never hurt them, though. So they seem to have picked up on that we're not really too much of a threat. So as you can see, this whole room is breeding pens, and each one has a male and a female. So every day, my job is to go through each and every pen to check on the birds to make sure nobody's hurt. We've got a male right there sitting on the pallet. I go through and make sure nobody's hurt. Everyone has plenty of food. Everyone gets fresh water. There, the female just jumped up with him, excuse me. And I scoop the pens to make sure there's not a whole lot of feces hanging around so it's not too smelly. I just make sure they're healthy and happy. So these are all the breeding pens. And so at the end of the day, every day, I go through the breeding pens and I collect the eggs. And I'll show you guys more about that process here soon. But I go through, see, we've got 2 more hallways. We got one right here and one at the very end down there. 2 more hallways of all breeding pens. So I go through them every day and pick up the eggs. See, here's more breeding pens in here. Lots and lots of pens. So those are the breeding pens. And this is where I spend a lot of my time in here. This is the lab. A lot of the job is doing dishes because there's a lot of food and water bowls. But we do try to do as much enrichment as possible. So this is our mealworm farm. So we have 12 containers with mealworms in them. And once a month, we will pass out all the worms that have bred in these. So you can kind of see them. They're those little brown worms. The birds absolutely love them. So once a month, they get a whole bunch of worms, and then we just keep rotating and keep restarting them every month. So they always have worms in their diet. And then we also give them kale, spinach, veggies, pretty much anything that they eat in the wild, they get here. So this is where all the dishes get done. You can see all the clean water bowls, big old sink, bleach water, and we're growing. Our kale doesn't look too hot right now, but it's we're working on it. So this is they love this kale. It's so good for them. It's got lots of nutrients, and they eat it in the wild. So it's really good part of their diet. So this is the lab. We do fecal tests to make sure none of them have anything going on with them, stuff like that. So that is the lab. I'm in there about 60% of my job. Let me turn on the light here. So this is our hospital room. So you guys remember earlier I was saying that the birds can get pretty aggressive during breeding season. And the aggression has started. So in here I have a female. The male that she was with, you guys can kind of barely see her. The male that she was with was kind of bullying her, and her feet weren't looking too good, and she was pretty skinny. So I took her out. We won't be using her eggs because they're probably not fertile anymore. But I took her out, and I've been giving her lots of kale, lots of mealworms, just trying to trying to beef her up a little because she was pretty skinny. So this is where the birds go if they are sick. We've got these curtains to decrease the stress. Like I said, these are wild animals, so they're not accustomed to us. So we've got that curtain in place. And then I usually keep the lights off in here just to decrease the stress as much as possible. So thankfully we only have one female in there at the moment. And this is our tool shed. So all of the shelters that you saw in there, we had to make those ourselves. And here's an example. So here's a board. We would cut it in half right here. And then we would make a little teepee, like an A-frame out of it, and then just nail gun it at the top, and it is a shelter. So it's a pretty easy process, but we've had to make all those from scratch. So we have a bunch of extra wood, lots of tools, just anything you could ever need is in this room. So we were in here a lot over the winter making some more shelters for the birds. And here's our restroom. So this is my most favorite room ever. This is where the babies are. Now, sadly, we don't have any babies yet, but we will soon. So after I collect the eggs, all the eggs go into this little cooler. I'll turn the light on here in a second. So they all go in that cooler. We have about 150 in there right now. But once we have, I think that holds about 300. So once we have about 300 eggs, we'll take the eggs and we'll put them in the incubator. So those little shelves will go right inside here, and they are then incubated for 22 days. So once we have eggs in there, I come in here every morning. I make sure there's plenty of water up top to keep it nice and humid in there, and I make sure all the eggs are looking good. So they're in there for 22 days. And then on the 23rd day, they go in these hatchers over here. So we know they're about to hatch in about 24 hours. So they go in here, and I pulled one out to show you guys. So this is what goes inside the hatcher. Each egg goes underneath these little cups. So we are able to mark their parentage. So we know who their moms and dads are. We want to keep as much diversity as possible, so we have nice, healthy babies. So in about 24 hours, I'll come back in the morning, and there will usually be little babies under all these cups that have just hatched out of their eggs. And that is my favorite part of the job, is coming in and hearing those guys peeping their cute little heads off. So they go from there to in these brooders. Now these brooders are temperature controlled, and they stay at about 95 degrees. And so the little birdies, we put down a poster board for them to walk on. And there's about 75 to 100 little babies just walking around in there. So they're in there for about a week. And then the hard part is taking them to Arizona, because that's where they're native to. So I'll show you guys how we transport them to Arizona. We keep them in the lab because there's no more room in that room for them. So we pack them up. They're about a week old, and they go in these things. They go right in there, and they're in there for the whole 16-hour ride. And so what we do is we have to pull over every 100 miles to feed and water them, because we can't keep the water in there with them because it'll splish and splash all over the place and get all over the chicks. And the chicks are not able to regulate their body temperatures yet. So if they get wet, they can get cold, and they'll pass. And we don't want to do that with our extremely endangered birds. So we stop every 100 miles to feed and water them in those crates. So back to the incubation room. Okay. So I went over the brooders, and then they go to Arizona. Now, at the very end of the season, we keep about 20 to 50 babies for ourselves. Turn the light on. So we keep them so we can use their genetics to breed more babies. So if we decide to keep some babies behind, we keep them in here. So they go from the brooder into these rooms. And in here, we call them teenagers. When the stage that they're in, when they're in these rooms, they're learning how to fly. And so we put a lot of boxes and shelters in here, and it's so fun to watch them. They just jump from box to box. They're learning how to fly. They're just loving life. So they're in there for a couple of weeks before they go. They're thrown into the fire, and they're in the breeding pens. So this is a very fun stage. I like to peek through that window. That's a window over there. I like to peek through and just watch them. It's so funny. So that's where they go when they're little teenagers learning how to fly. And this is the called the Chick Lab. This is where we do all the dishes and things like that for the incubation room. So lots of dishes on here. We keep the eggs in here. And so I'll show you guys the process of the egg collecting. So I take this tray with me every day, and I'll go through each pen, and I'll collect the egg, and I'll put it in these little holes. And then I will literally write on the egg what pen it's from. And that helps us keep the genetics to know whose egg this is, who was the mom, who was the dad. And then on here, we tally which females are producing. And then on here, we keep track of how many eggs we have. So right now we have 142 eggs in the wine cooler. And we are setting these eggs in the incubator right over there. We are setting those June 7th. So we should have babies middle of June, hopefully. That is the plan. So that's just the door to the outside. But that is our facility, the Masked Bobwhite breeding facility in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. I got all the doors open.
Hey, Sarah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, the signal's really good right now. I'm wondering if we can pop back into one of the breeding pens and take a look.
The brooding pens?
Or one of the breeding pens with the birds.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we'll go in here.
Yeah, the signal's cleared up a lot since we started.
Okay, awesome. So that's the second hallway. We didn't see this one. So each of these has a male and a female with plenty of things to do. Fresh food, fresh water, lots of shelters, balls and gems to pick at. And usually I will, when I'm going through these, I will find little eggs just laying around the pen. It's kind of funny. They're not picky on where they lay their eggs. It's pretty easy for me to find them. So there are 37 of these rooms in this building. I'm trying to see if I can find an egg to show you guys. Where is a real egg? Does anybody have any eggs? Huh. We can go in this first hallway, and I bet you there will be eggs.
Very cool, Sarah. It's coming through much, much clearer. We got a really good look at the pairs.
Oh, awesome. I assume it's because I'm closer to the router. But here's the first hallway. I'll show you guys an egg if I see one. And you guys can see the males and females in there. These guys all got clean shelters this morning. I took their shelters out and gave them a good wash. They're they're pretty calm when I'm not in there messing around with them. And these lucky ducks get the sunlight. They sure do love that. And it's a little bit louder in here because we've got the fans on. It's already pretty hot here in Oklahoma. Okay, here's an egg. And so I'm going to go in here, and they're going to fly above my head. But it's worth it because I can show you guys the egg. You're all right. See, they're not too scared of me, but there's the egg right there. See, so usually I collect about 30 of those a day, and they're not very conspicuous. Sometimes they're out in the open, sometimes they're under the shelters, but they're just itty bitty little eggs. Lots and lots of birds. All right.
Very cool, Sarah. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. I love showing you guys around.
So, Sarah, I'm wondering, do you have an estimate of how many are in the wild?
There are less than 50. I would say my guess would be about 40 in the wild.
Wow.
Yes.
So it is really incredibly important work that you're doing at the facility.
Yes, we have about 25% of the world's population here, and we only have 200 birds. So the wildlife refuge that we release them on, they have the other 75% of the birds, and they're also trying to breed them as well.
All right. Well, that was a great tour. Thank you so much for taking us to the through the process.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think if you're ready, would you like to meet some classrooms?
Definitely.
All right, let's do it. Let's start off. We are going to go to Woodbury. We've got two grade 2 classrooms hanging out in Woodbury, Mrs. Gary's class and Mrs. Hildebrand's class. I'm going to turn your microphone on. Let's see how you guys are doing.
Hi, everybody.
That is a lot of grade 2s. Can you guys remind me where Woodbury is?
We're in Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Oh,
Excellent.
Very cool.
Minnesota.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to let you guys go ahead with 2 questions because I know you have to leave a little bit early, but we'd love some questions.
Definitely.
So, boss, go ahead. Just talk to my computer. Loud.
How long will it take before the birds are not endangered?
Well, that's a great question. It could be anywhere from 3 years to 10 years. It all depends on how quickly they start breeding in the wild. That is the most important thing, is that they start breeding in the wild, because if they don't do that, then our efforts are basically for nothing. So we're hoping at about 2023 they will be taken off the endangered list.
All right. It's still, it boggles the mind that, we saw more today than are in the wild. That's scary to think that there's species like that on our planet.
It's definitely, it's very sad.
All
right, grade 2s. You guys have another question?
How many eggs do quails lay?
They can lay an average about 15 to 16 during the breeding season, but that's if they have a nest. So in the wild, they have a little nest where they lay their eggs. But what I'm doing is I'm taking the eggs every day so the mothers keep laying them. So that's really good for us because they can lay up to 30 or 40 since I'm collecting them every day. And that means more babies, and that means more birds to release in the wild. So normally about 15 to 16 in the wild, but for us, a lot more since I keep stealing their eggs.
All right, but theft for a good cause.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
All right. Let's visit a couple of grade 4 classrooms. So the first one, Mrs. Delpino's class, they're hanging out with us in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Let's get that microphone turned on. How are we doing, Thunder Bay?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
You have to come down here if you have a question.
Oh. Wow, signals.
Come up to the front, Robert. Come on up to the front. Quick. Does anyone else have a question? No. Go ahead, Kaden.
Can I go?
Go ahead. Ask your question.
I love animals.
I love animals too.
Who doesn't? They're pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Samiha, go ahead.
Why are they sent to Arizona?
Well, you see, that's where they're native to. That's where they've been since the beginning of time. So they're really accustomed to the Arizona climate and the plants and the animals out there. So if we were to release them in Oklahoma, it'd be totally different. They wouldn't know what to do. So they probably wouldn't survive. So that's why we take them to Arizona, because that's where they're native to. So they know how to live, they know how to eat, they know what predators to avoid, things like that. That's why we take them all the way to Arizona.
All right, we'll swing back to Thunder Bay shortly, but let's take a trip now. Let's see. I've got another grade 4 classroom hanging out with us at Wayne Elementary School, Mrs. Johnson's group. Let's get their microphone turned on. How are we doing, boys and girls?
Hello.
Hi, guys.
We're actually second graders.
Ah, you did a little switch up on me. That's okay.
Why don't the male and the female get to choose their mates?
Well, it would be hard for us to tell who picked who, because they're not like humans. They're not like, I want that one, I like that person. Birds are very finicky when it comes to their mates, and we also want to get the best diversity. And we do have birds in this facility that are brothers and sisters, and so we don't want them to breed, right? So that's why we choose their mates, so we don't get any incest or anything like that. No brothers and sisters mating. We don't want that. So that's why we choose their mates, so we can get the healthiest birds possible.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that is really important once populations get really small, is to try and preserve that diversity. To make sure you've got the healthiest members of the population. And then I'm sure you keep an eye out. Are there times that maybe it seems like the birds just aren't compatible and you have to make switches sometimes?
Yes, actually, we've only had one pair like that so far. But the male was just so mean to the female, and we weren't getting eggs at all. Sometimes we'll get eggs, but they're just infertile. But she wasn't even producing eggs at all. So we removed both of them, and we just put them back in the original pens where they go during the winter time. And then this next season, we used both of them again. And the new pairs that they're in, they are both producing eggs. So it turns out that pair we had last year, they were not a good match.
All right, fair enough. Let's see. Let's take a trip now to Mrs. McIntosh's grade 5 class hanging out here in Canada in Brampton, Ontario. Let's get that microphone turned on. How are we doing, grade 5s?
Good.
Hi, guys.
Hi, my name is Jess. Hi, my name is Jess. Can you repeat the reason why the birds are endangered? We couldn't hear.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. So in the 1970s, the land that these birds are native to got bought by a cattle company. And so this cattle company had their cows going through their land and destroying everything. The food the plants that grew their food, their shelter, everything. So they couldn't adjust to their trashed out land. And so unfortunately they were all wiped out. But now that land is currently a wildlife refuge. And so they're bringing back all their native plants and things like that, so they're able to thrive again. All right, so that's important too, is not only protecting the species, but also looking after that habitat. So it's a good place for them to go back to. All right, let's see. Mrs. Ford's class, Thornhill, Ontario, grade 6s. Let's get that microphone turned on. There it is. How are we doing, grade 6?
Okay, so I have a question about, you said that you write on the eggs to find out which how to sort them out and everything. Do you use a special type of marker, or is it just a regular marker?
It is a fine tip Sharpie. Because if it was the regular Sharpies, we wouldn't be able to read it, and I just have to write very lightly with the fine tip Sharpie, or you can actually crack the egg, and we definitely don't want that. So yeah, it's a fine tip Sharpie, so it's permanent, so it can't get rubbed off or anything. But it is safe for the eggs. It's not gonna affect their growing or anything like that.
All right, let's quickly visit our class one more time. Our grade 2 classes in Minnesota. I know they have to go for a drill soon, but maybe we can squeak in one more question.
Anybody have another question?
No.
Okay. Luke, come on up. No, Luke, just, what is your name? Sorry, he's trying to get up front.
It's okay. It's a lot of people to get through.
Oh, I thought you had a question. Okay, go ahead, Kate. Speak into the mic.
My question is, do you collect the shells so then you can remember which pen they're from?
That's a really good question. So when they hatch from the egg, we keep the egg, and what we do is we assign that little baby chick a tiny little leg band. We get these leg bands that are originally for canary songbirds, but they fit perfectly on our chicks. So when we take them out of that hatcher underneath those little nest cups, we put a little plastic band around their leg, and that tells us what their egg number was, so we can't get anyone mixed up. And then once they're older, they get that little band taken off, and they get a permanent metal band put on, and it doesn't hurt them or anything. They hardly even know it's there, and that gives them a special number, so we can always keep track of who's who.
All right, great question. So I'm going to turn your mic on one more time, grade 2s, if you want to say a big goodbye, because I know you're going to have your drill very soon.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
All right, awesome job. Mrs. Johnson's group, let's turn your microphone on again. Do you guys have another question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What are the bobwhite predators?
Mostly they're hawks. So that's why cover is so important for quail, because when a hawk is flying over, the hawk is looking down, looking for something to munch on. So that's why these guys are constantly running from shelter to shelter, from cover to cover, so a hawk can't get them. Hawks are definitely their #1 predator.
All
right, great question. Mrs. Delpino's group, Thunder Bay, your microphone's on.
How do you go collect the eggs without the birds escaping?
Could you repeat that?
Thanks a lot.
How do you get the eggs without the birds trying to escape or flying around?
Trying to escape. Well, they do escape a lot. So we have, I don't know if you guys know this, but there is a lot of doors. So when I go down each hallway, I close the door behind me, and a lot of the times the birds do escape when I come in. They'll fly out and they'll be in that hallway, and I have to get a net and I have to catch them and put them back. So yes, they do escape, and it is hard to get them. So I try my hardest not to let them slip through the door, but sometimes they do.
All right. Keeps you on your toes.
Definitely. They're smart little birds.
Mrs. McIntosh's class, your microphone is on again.
All right. If they're in captivity for so long, will they survive in the wild?
Will they survive in the wild? Well, they should. With the land that they're native to now being a wildlife refuge, that means that land is basically untouchable. They can't go in and hunt them since they are so severely endangered, and they're replanting the plants that they need to survive. They're modifying trees that are there so they have more accessible cover. So they are definitely, we have about a 20% survival rate, and that's pretty good for ground birds. Ground birds are about 5 to 10%. So we are very hopeful that they are surviving and breeding, hopefully, around this time, the ones that we released last year.
Yeah. And then it looks like you handle them as little as possible so that they don't, become, used to humans. So trying to give them that best start.
Yeah. We handle them as little as possible.
All right. Mrs. Ford's class, your microphone is on again.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Hi.
Tap. What?
Just go.
Okay. How did you choose this job?
How did I do it?
No. How did you decide to pick this job?
Well, what's funny is I went to college and I made a really good friend. Her name was Brittany. Brittany was a year older than me, and we both obviously love animals. So Brittany graduated in 2016, and she got a job up here. And then I graduated, and I asked her if they had any internships up here, because I just wanted to work with animals. I didn't care what kind, as long as I was around animals. So I asked my friend Brittany if they offered any internships, and I applied and I got it. And then very coincidentally, they needed a second person to help take care of the birds. So I was the most convenient person to hire, being the intern at the time. So now it is Brittany and I, past OSU alums, working here at the Avian Research Center.
All right. Very cool. Well, we still have a few more minutes, Sarah, so I'm going to visit a couple more classrooms because I do see a few people still at the camera. So, Mrs. McIntosh, I see someone front and center.
Hi, my name is Leanna. And do you know how you take the birds to Arizona? Where in Arizona do you put them? Like, do you put them in another
pen?
Yeah, another pen, or do you put it in a jungle in their habitat?
So we take them down to Arizona, and when we get there, it's very late at night. So then we keep them in the pens until morning. We bring them in with us into our where we're staying, and we make sure they're comfortable, they have food and water, and then that very next morning they're put in these Acclamation pens. And basically what those are is they are pens that are out in the wild, but they have chain link around them and on top so hawks can't get to them, but they're still in the wild. So it has all the plants and things like that, and we're kind of teaching them how to be wild again. So they're in those pens for about 2 weeks, and then they are released into the wild. No chain link, no protection from hawks. So that's the process they go through when we get down to Arizona. All
right, great question. I think I see someone in red, and Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson, the question.
Go ahead.
How much do bobwhites weigh?
How much do they weigh? A healthy bobwhite should weigh about 150 grams. So not in pounds, but grams. They're very light. The female that I was telling you guys about that's in my hospital, she weighs 107 grams. So she's very, very underweight. So I've been giving her lots of treats trying to fatten her up. So they need to weigh about 150 grams.
All right, let's check in one more time in Thunder Bay. Do you guys have a final question?
Oh, let's just go. Yep, Sydney has a question.
How long have you been working for, Sarah?
I've been here for a year. I graduated last May from college, and then I got the internship here. So I've been here almost a year now.
All right, and Mrs. Ford's class, do you have a final question?
Jake?
Okay, no? Okay, no, we don't.
That's okay. Perfect. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. That was awesome. It looks like a really great facility. You keep it in great shape, very well organized. So that's probably pretty darn important too.
Yes.
And yeah, I would love to do another event later in June.
Oh yeah, when we have babies, that would be very cool.
Yeah, it'll be fun to get some of the same classrooms back so they can see some of the babies, bring some new ones along for the ride. But again, amazing work. So important, especially with this species, one of the most endangered in North America. So thank you so much for what you do and sharing with us today.
Of course, I absolutely loved it, and I would love to show you guys the babies later this summer.
All right. Well, I will send you a message and we'll get that set up. But for now, I'm going to turn all the microphones on. And boys and girls, if you want to get loud one more time, a big goodbye and thank you. Then we'll sign off for today. So here we go. Everybody, that was a great May. Sarah, thank you so much for a great hangout, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
We'll see you, everyone.